This beast is the Anker Powerhouse 757, also known as the Solix F1200. And it is an incredible piece of kit that has meant that thanks to this, I can stand up here in the Welsh mountains and have a game of Warzone with the chaps. How cool is that? But that's not all this is good for. It's got a ton of other uses, and for me it's completely changed the game. So let's pop back to the country club and have a chat about this thing. I do a lot of travelling for both stews reviews and fun in my camper van, which albeit has been at the garage more than it's been on the driveway in the past 3 years, but still, one common theme is that I'm always running out of charge on my devices. Up until now, I've managed with smaller, simple USB power banks, but there's numerous occasions where this just hasn't been suitable, and there's been times where access to 3-pin plugs or more power would have saved me a hell of a lot of hassle, so I thought it's time to upgrade to something more substantial with more versatility, and this is where the Anker Powerhouse 757 comes in. Now, for those that are confused with the naming, it would appear that Anker's battery brand is rebranding to Anker Solix, kind of how Anker have their Eufy brand, which is smart home, and Soundcore, which is their audio brand. So I believe this is now called the Solix F1200, which is in reference to its watt-hour capacity of 1,229 watts. So why this particular model? Well, for starters, we needed something that was easy to transport, to be able to throw in the back of the van, but equally something that could fit in the back of the car without taking up too much room. And this isn't a huge unit. We also needed some good capacity, and I wanted the ability to run higher power devices from it because I'm British and therefore practically addicted to tea, and I thought it would be a good idea to get something that could power a kettle. Like this. With this in mind, it would seem like the F1200 seems a perfect mix between size, capacity and power output. It seems to tick all the boxes for me. It features 2 AC 3-pin outlets capable of delivering a combined total of 1500 watts, along with 4 regular USB ports that deliver 12 watts each, a 60 watt USB-C port and a 100 watt USB-C port too. It's also got a 12 volt car socket which is capable of delivering 120 watts of power as well. Now with this range of inputs, I've pretty much got all of my bases covered here, offering a complete flexibility with whatever I want to plug in. Also, on the rear, it's got 2 inputs, one for mains, which I'll come back to later, and one for solar input as well, so you've essentially got 2 options there to recharge it. It actually has a built-in solar controller too and can accept 300 watts of charge at any one time from solar panels, which means that it'll charge in about 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours from flat on a sunny day. Now it works with any solar panel, but Anker do make some awesome foldable solar panels, which is going to be my next purchase so that I can fold them up, put them in the car and make sure I can charge this on the go as long as I've got sun, which in Wales doesn't happen a lot. But anyway, from a transportability perspective, it weighs in just shy of 20 kilograms, which is absolutely not the lightest thing in the world, and you're not going to be carrying this in your backpack whilst hiking, but it's certainly light enough for people to hulk around your workspace, and certainly light enough to carry from here to the car, which is pretty much all it'll do. And to make things easier for transport, it has 2 massive grab handles, which makes it really easy to get a good grip, and without these it'd be a pain in the arse to move, but they've got it in and I'm glad they've built these handles in. It also means it actually could probably be carried by 2 people quite easily without hassle. Now, these handles flow into this unibody design which encases the exterior of the unit, and it overall gives it a pretty rugged design. Now supposedly it's drop proof to a certain extent, and I must admit that at first I was a bit skeptical because the shell appears to be made of this kind of like hard plastic. However, on the inside is an aluminium automotive grade frame, which is what will take most of the brunt of any fall. So whereas the outside might get damaged, the internals and the battery themselves should be fully protected, although I'd rather not test this myself because there's a little voice in the back of my head that says dropping a battery of this size from any sort of height is a rather terrible idea. But this is Stu's reviews, and I have done worse reviews. no, wait, no, that's a terrible idea. I'm not going to do that. Or could I? No, absolutely not. Anyway, the aluminium frame isn't the only safety feature. It also features smart temperature monitoring, which is built into this battery itself and scans it over 100 times per second and monitors for any fluctuations or increases in temperature, and will shut off the battery if it detects abnormal temperatures. Now, this ultimately creates a safer environment and at the same time helps preserve the lifespan of the lithium iron phosphate batteries inside this unit. Now, actually, another part of the design which is commendable is the huge display on the front that shows the percentage remaining outgoing or incoming electricity, and even a little prediction based on the usage, which is super useful to give us an idea of how long you've got left before the battery will run out. And talking about the capabilities, as I mentioned earlier, I needed something that was going to be relatively high capacity, and this is certainly that at 1229 watt hours. To put it into context, I could charge my phone from empty to full around 100 times before this ran out. But one stat that's equally important for me is the output. I needed this to be high enough that it's going to be versatile. So it could do things like charge my phone or laptop or drones, but I also wanted the option to be able to run things like small heaters, kettles, fridges, that kind of thing, and to be able to supply extra charge to things like electric bikes and scooters. And this is very capable in that respect because it delivers up to 1800 watts of energy in total at any one time across all of its ports. But bear in mind that the ports themselves are limited to the specs that I mentioned earlier. That 1800 watt is the total power output. It just means that when I'm taking it out as part of our filming kit, I've got a device that I know will power 99% of anything I'll ever want to plug into it. But it goes a lot further than just being able to fit it into my studio kit. I've actually found that it's super useful at home too. Firstly, I'm constantly doing DIY that involves trailing extension cables throughout the house and right the way across the garden. And when you have kids and dogs that seemingly exist to only get in the way, this is not a positive experience, especially when my daughter decides to yank the extension cord attached to the circular saw. Having this now replaces the need for the extension cords because I can just pop this right next to where I'm working and I've got an electric supply right there with no risk of death due to curious toddlers. And it's worth its weight in gold just for that. And the second thing this is good for around the home is that it's great as an emergency piece of kit. Now, I live in the absolute middle of nowhere in the Welsh Mountains and we're prone to power cuts. Thankfully, I haven't had to do it yet, but it means that when we get the next one, I'll be able to whip this out and plug stuff directly in to continue whatever I was doing at the time. But it's not just work and home life that this fits in. I now consider this as part of my staple camping kit. And it will certainly serve me excellently in the camper van to power all my mod cons, but more importantly, going back to the beginning, I can power my Starlink from it. This has been a really important piece of the puzzle for me because it predominantly means that I can get high-speed internet wherever I am in the country and no matter what vehicle I'm in. And because Starlink only pulls around 75 to 100 watts, it means that in theory it could power that high-speed internet all day. At the moment, it's got the PlayStation, the monitor and Starlink pulled into it, and we've got 4 hours left on 86% battery, which is awesome. It means I can sit up here and have a real good gaming session. Is that something you wanted to do? But putting the PlayStation aside, that's just a kind of demonstration. The fact that I can have high-speed internet. I mean, if I turn the PlayStation off and the monitor goes up to 8 hours left. 8 hours left. Just under 8 hours left on 86%. That's 8 hours of high-speed internet powered by Starlink plugged in to this bad boy. I'm in the middle of nowhere and I'm getting 200 megabytes a second. That's faster than my home internet. So in theory, I should probably start chucking this in the boot more often and coming to upload up here. Let's talk about the cost, because initially I was having a small heart attack when it came to the price. This particular model, without any discounts, will set you back an eye-watering £1,099. But when I was doing my research on finding out what other creators thought of this particular battery, I came across the YouTube channel The Trudgeons, which focuses primarily on caravan content, but Dan over there had some really interesting calculations on this. He mentioned that you could, in theory, make your money back after just 50 nights of staying at a campsite, simply by booking off-grid pitches or sites versus main hookup pitches, which means for some, it could effectively pay for itself in a year or two. Now, the main argument here is that how would you recharge it? Well, if you weren't using solar panels and you wanted to charge via the mains, Anker have built in a technology that can charge this to 80% capacity in under 60 minutes. So if you're sneaky enough, when you need to charge it, you could pop to the local pub near wherever you are, stick it under the table and charge it over a pint or two. By doing this, it would easily pay for itself in savings, and eventually, or more than likely, end up paying for itself several times over, depending on how you're intending on using something like this. And the thing is, I mentioned earlier that it uses lithium iron phosphate batteries, which have a much greater lifespan than many options out there. And those are renowned for being extremely safe and have a much better efficiency than other types of battery too. So on paper, the lifespan of these is around 3,000 cycles before it drops to 80% capacity. That means that if you charged it fully every single morning and depleted it by the same evening, then you could use this for nearly a decade before you'd see any noticeable decrease in capacity. Now, obviously, this is unverifiable until 2034, and even then, I doubt I'll have ran this battery flat and charged it back up 3,000 times within the next decade. So I can't say for certain if the paper spec will live up to the hype, but what I can say is that I haven't really got a great deal to critique on this product, partly because it's so simplistic. There's not much to it, and partly because all of the functions have worked really well. Perhaps the only couple of things worth mentioning are that firstly, the internal fans can be quite loud when using a lot of things plugged into it, especially with the AC sockets. I mean, this is perfectly normal to help keep the overall temperature of the battery down, but it's worth mentioning if you're the sort of person that wakes up at the drop of a pin 3 villages over, like me. Sleeping with this whilst powering a bunch of things through AC might be a little bit difficult. Another point is that although it's not necessary, there's no wireless charging on the top, which would have been nice, and it's something that I've seen before on other mobile solutions very similar to this. And another thing actually that would have been nice would have been a companion app to come with this, so I could connect it to Bluetooth and monitor remotely within the local area. But this is no big deal, it's not an issue. Perhaps if I'm being really critical, the last point would be that Anker have only included an XT60 cable for solar charging. Obviously, this is intending for you to connect up to Anker's own solar panel system, which uses XT60, which are good for sure, being portable and folding, but there'll be many people with already existing solar setup that use the more traditional connections. So if you're one of those people, then you'll need to spend a few quid on Amazon to get the adapter that goes from XT60 to the MC4 for solar panel connections. But other than that, this is a great piece of kit that's going to be an integral part of my work and personal life from here on. And what makes me the most pleased is that it feels like it will last a hell of a long time. I would say that perhaps this isn't for everyone, but if you're like me and any of the situations that I've just discussed in this episode sounds like you, I think if you look past the initial cost, this will end up being a godsend for you. And you never know, if you use it the right way, it will very likely end up paying for itself. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I'll be sticking around for a little bit after this episode goes live, answering all of your comments. So if you have any questions or just want to say hi, make sure you drop down to the comments and leave a message. And if I've helped you at all in deciding if the Powerhouse 757 or Solix F1200 is for you, then make sure that you hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys back for another episode of Stu's Reviews soon.